Pylon listeners, we are back, and we are only 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. Oh boy, good time of year. Baseball's just starting up too, if you're into that. So it's a good time of year. Spring right around the corner. Nevertheless, we're here to discuss the NFL draft, which is 2 weeks away. I'm Big Z representing the Detroit Lions. Let's get around to the rest of the Pylon crew. We got Remy representing the Vikings.
Skull to the bowl, purple rain and control. Go Vikes, baby.
Kinger representing the Packers.
Boys, as always, good to be back. One of my favorite times of the year. Love me some NFL draft.
And then last but not least, Barney representing the Bears.
Ryan Pace, all eyes on you, buddy.
All right, gentlemen. So with the NFL draft 2 weeks away, we're going to leading up to that, we are going to have this week a focus on the defensive prospects for the NFL draft. We're going to go by each position group and just highlight some names for you to get them on your radar to get you ready for draft night. The next week, we're going to do the offense, and then we're going to do a mock draft, our final mock draft right before the actual thing on April 29th. So, like I said, we're going to be focusing on defense this episode, and we're going to go by each position group here. And each one of us is going to take a turn kind of discussing that position group a little bit, and then we'll probably have some comments along the way. So, Kinger, we're going to shoot this over to you first. We're going to start with D-line. So just give us some of the top prospects that really catch your eye heading into this draft here.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to get this kicked off here, boys. So defensive line, as we're all aware, they're saying this is probably going to be one of the weaker position groups in the 2021 draft. Doesn't look like the potential is, we might be looking at a first rounder, potentially two. But really, we're going to be looking at a lot of day 2 and day 3 guys here. But that being said, there is a lot of potential with some of these players. And, after looking over the tape, doing my research on my end, there's definitely some guys that I'm really excited about. Just to start off with, number one guy that, we've talked about here on this podcast. He's going to end up being a first rounder, probably the only one, like I mentioned. Got to love Christian Barmore out of Alabama, 6'5", 311. Absolute beast of a physical specimen, 6 sacks in 2020. Really a lot of high potential for him. Projected probably going to be a day 1 starter, and most likely for whoever does end up drafting him, and saying he can really play in, multiple defensive schemes. The big thing with him is really going to be is him trying to eliminate those kind of so-so average games, because although we did finish the season strongly last year, there were a handful of times in some of the games earlier in the season where he kind of disappeared, and people were wondering, where he was with as much talent and potential as he has. It's really got to be on him to, continue to play at that elite level, because he really does have the potential to be an outstanding defensive lineman. These next two guys I'm going to mention here, pretty consistently ranked towards the top of the defensive lineman rankings. I'm probably going to butcher these guys' names, but a guy that I really like, potentially we'll see how it falls, but if he ended up a Green Bay Packer, I would not complain at all. Another UCLA guy, Osa Odighizuwa. I knew I was going to butcher these names tonight here, but he's 6'2", 285, 3-time state wrestling champ in high school, a little bit undersized, but an absolute explosive athlete with the ability to change angles quickly, really good with his hands. He had 30 tackles, 4 sacks, 6 tackles for loss in 2020. He's a guy I'd love to pair, potentially alongside Kenny Clark. A lot of upside with him. Another guy who...
And do you think he's a second? What round do you think?
He's probably going to be a day 2 guy. He's probably looking at second or third round. These next couple guys are probably going to be day 2 guys.
Okay. And Odighizuwa is how you pronounce his last name. Odighizuwa.
Odighizuwa. I love it.
That's fun to say.
Yeah. Well, I might need you here on this next one too, because this next name, again, my pronunciation here, Levine Ozurike out of Washington.
You got it.
I did. Wow. Okay, let's go. That's a step in the right direction there. But he's a guy who opted out in 2020, didn't end up playing football. But he was first team All Pac-12 in 2019, had 45 tackles, 2 sacks. A little bit undersized as well, but extremely strong. Saying he has a very explosive first step. Really had a lot of potential. A lot of teams, I guess there was a lot of hype around him and his potential for his ability to kind of shoot up the draft boards heading into this year. He did opt out. But again, with him, it's really about consistency because like Barmore, there were some games when he played that he kind of disappeared and didn't really showcase what looked like he up to his abilities. But Washington's had a pretty good history of bringing out some defensive linemen here in the last few years. And he's a guy again that shows potential to be a impactful player for an NFL team when he gets drafted.
Yeah, not a big stat guy in college by any means, but what I read about him is that he can play a good 3 technique for an NFL team at maybe a Pro Bowl level.
Absolutely, right? And so like I said, here's these guys, these guys are most of these people that I'm mentioning now, they're ones who are saying we got a lot of upside here, right? And these next 2 guys, we'll bring it down to the Iowa boys here for you Iowa boys. Davion Nixon, he's a guy I really like out of Iowa, 6'3", 305. Good size for the position, had 45 tackles, 5.5 sacks. Again, the big thing, like a lot of these guys will keep saying, is his consistency. Against Penn State, Northwestern last year, he had some of the highest graded defensive lineman games in all of college football. He's great at holding blocks, good lateral quickness. The big thing for him is really, although he had 5.5 sacks, they're saying a lot of pass rush is really the question, right? His first step off the line has not always been great, and they're saying the ability to kind of collapse the pocket and take on those blockers is going to be his kind of biggest hurdle in the NFL. But the traits are there, right? And for his size and guy who's really only come on late, really came on late in his football career, there's definitely a guy that there's going to be a team that's going to take a flyer on, and hopefully he can develop into something.
Yeah.
And then last one, I'll love to hear your guys' comments on this because I'm throwing them out there because you got to go with off the tape of 2019. And we're going to go, and I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about here. We're going to go with Marvin Wilson out of Florida State. So 6'5", 305, 2019 had 44 tackles and 5 sacks. Looking like if he would have came out of the draft, looking like he was probably going to be a late first rounder, second round draft pick after the 2019 season. Comes back in 2020, tries to do something kind of similar to what Derek Brown did at Auburn, really throws up pretty much a dud of a season. Only had 17 tackles, 1 sack. And really everybody's kind of questioning his testing numbers for the defensive lineman actually didn't come back very good either. I think he was towards the bottom in historical actually in some of the categories, but really showed in 2019 that there was a lot of potential there, right? He's very explosive, great closing speed, took good angles, pretty good with his hands. The biggest thing for him is going to be kind of being that pass rusher, but like you mentioned previously, with Levine, has the potential to be a good 3 technique player, hopefully eat up some blocks. And if he plays and showcases some of those skill sets that he did in 2019, I mean, there's absolutely no reason why a team shouldn't take a mid-round flyer on him, in my opinion. What do you guys think of Wilson?
Well, the thing with him is that he was at a school that had 3 head coaches in a matter of like 3 years. He was actually part of the Cam Akers recruiting class there, is what I read. But those numbers are still concerning. But maybe I don't know everything about Florida State's scheme throughout the years and why one worked in 2019 and then it didn't again in 2020. But I mean, like you said, there's a high upside based on that 2019 tape. Maybe 2020 is a weird year for everybody in general. But I also read that he's kind of like Barrymore, maybe to a lesser extent, about kind of that motor where he disappears for times and then shows up at certain points as well. But I mean, Remy and Barney, do you guys see yourselves taking a D lineman in the mid rounds here? Because that's where I imagine you guys would be drafting if you got one.
So with Minnesota, at 14, we were actually projected to get Davion Nixon, and I was all for it.
Really? At 14?
At 14, and I'll tell you why. So his pro day, I believe, so Amir Smith-Marset just completely showed out and overshadowed him. He stole the show, and I think that's what slipped in a lot of pro scouting, was just all the hype around Amir Smith-Marset, because Amir is going to be a sleeper of the draft, the wide receiver. But I do believe Davion. I mean, Davion for sure. If we needed a D lineman, we signed Tomlinson, so we're set on our line. Davion was a guy that we looked at, and I believe could, I saw him fall back to as far as like 18 to 20, but I wouldn't be mad if Minnesota grabbed him there at 14. We were projected early on to do that.
Interesting. And Barney, do you think the Bears are going to be looking for a D lineman in the mid rounds here, or is that not the priority right now? I would imagine they target offensive line more in the mid rounds.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had some depth and key players leave free agency. Roy Robertson Harris got the bag. But you never say never. One guy that I have an eye on in like the later rounds, maybe a day 3 prospect, is Kyrie Tonga. Out of BYU. Really big, 6'4", 321. Just knows how to kind of clog a hole and is a really good run stopper. That's somebody that I wouldn't mind, in day 3, but I don't see us picking a D lineman, in the first couple days.
I could also see Barmore falling to early second round in this draft as well. That might, if he's there at 40, I could see the Lions taking him. Otherwise, I would imagine that the Lions have other needs, especially like linebacker, wide receiver, that they're going to be targeting in mid rounds. So
I don't think there's any way the Packers would let Barmore fall past 29. I really don't. For a team that needs defensive line help like we do, I don't think there's any chance.
They need linebackers though too.
Yes, we do. I agree, but I like the young tandem that we have. I think we have a potential with Kamal Martin, and I'm blanking on just because I'm looking at other things right now. The dude from Minnesota that we drafted last year, or not, Chris Barnes and Kamal Martin. Kamal Martin is from Minnesota. Between those two, those guys showed a lot of potential last year, and I actually think that there's at least something to build off of with those guys. So defensive line for me is a position that I think the Packers need a lot more help at, and I would be shocked if Barmore fell out of the first round, especially with Green Bay sitting there at the end.
All right. So just for the sake of moving on, we got a lot of other groups to cover here. So now we're going to move on to edge rushers, and I'm going to take that one. So, I mean, there's a lot of big names that you've probably heard, but kind of like Kinger was saying, with the D lineman, it kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with the edge rushers too, is that there isn't an obvious edge rusher like a Chase Young in this draft. There is a lot of guys with high upside, but it's kind of a wild card. So the first one that's truly, this is really hard to predict. A guy named Jalen Phillips out of Miami. He can be he has top 10 type talent, but nobody knows how good he can actually be. So he only has played 1 year of D-line in his career. He actually wasn't even a D-lineman in high school. Then he went to Miami, where he was first team All-ACC, led the ACC in sacks. Then he opted out in 2020. So he has only 1 year of tape at D-line. I mean, truly just a true wild card, 260, 4.57 40, and one just dominant year of tape. But it's really hard to say, though. So that's why he's high upside, but nobody knows for sure what they're going to get out of him. The next one is Aziz Ojoulari. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that name as the top DN prospect. Oh, not even 21 years old yet. Out of Georgia, 249, 4.6, 140. Extremely productive D end out of there. The other one that might actually go in front of him too is Kwity Paye out of Michigan. That's a name that might go first even. He doesn't have like a great pass rush apparently, but he plays with a lot of athleticism and high energy, like a high motor. So he's a high motor player, but he's from that Michigan defense. So they did not have a great year last year necessarily, but his name is thrown around constantly as the first edge rusher taken off the board. Here's another name that's really, really intriguing, and I just lost my list, but it's Jason Owe out of Penn State. This guy is fascinating. So 257, 6 6'4" or about 6'5", ran a 4.37 40-yard dash. You think with those type of measurables, 82-inch wingspan, so really wide arms as well. Based on his measurables, you think there's nothing this guy could do wrong. But then you go look at his production in college, and that is what does not have him at the top of the board for people. He had 0 sacks last year, only a couple the year before that. So you got to wonder, why is this guy how is he so athletic and yet he cannot produce? That's always a big red flag. But Remy, I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah actually talk about this prospect, Jason Owe, and they said Daniel Hunter kind of had the same thing about him coming out of college. Now, Daniel Hunter was taken 3rd round, right?
3rd round, yeah.
So not quite the athleticism this guy has, but and I'm just saying in terms of a guy that people kind of had lower because of his production in college, yet showed a lot of athleticism.
Daniil Hunter, 6'6", coming out of LSU in the 3rd round. Zimmer straight up told him he was drafted because of his athleticism and he had long arms. Like his wingspan is just, and he might be the most jacked guy in the league aside from like Aaron Donald or someone. But yeah, definitely that 6'6" long arm and just pure athleticism off the edge will get you like Daniil Hunter.
Right. So, and another one here is Gregory Rousseau out of Miami, very similar to Jalen Phillips' career path, actually. And then one more I just want to throw out there is Joseph Asai out of Texas. This guy's only 21 years old, 256, ran a 4.62 40. Just a guy that's relentless on the field. I love these high motor defensive linemen. Those always seem to be the guys that stick around in the NFL. To a degree, a guy like there's always those. That's what scares me. A guy like Barmore or Kinger, like the D linemen. They're not known for their motor, and that if you have a good motor, that can fix a lot of issues with certain things. But obviously not. They don't have the high upside necessarily sometimes. But anyways, those are some of the names on the board there. I could see the Lions grabbing one of these guys in the early 2nd round with that 2nd pick, because God only knows the Lions need help at the pass rush. But you have to consider Lions do have Trey Flowers. They do. They just got Caleb Phillips. I believe that's his last name, from the Falcons, the 1st round bust. So I mean they have a few players at the edge. So I don't know if it's necessarily a priority, especially with all the issues they have at linebacker. And in the secondary, and in the wide receiver room too. And there's going to be a lot of value for wide receivers in the 2nd round here. But man, if Gregory Rousseau or Phillips is there, I would highly suggest the Lions take one of those two guys, just because the upside is so high, and they have a lot of 1st round picks in the next few years. But did you guys? Does any name scream to you that you want on your team here? Maybe I didn't even mention one of them.
Big Z, I think an important thing here is that out of all the positions, I think this one's the most volatile. And who is volatile, ranked highest in everybody's, depth chart here. For the most part, a lot of these positions, at least the top 3 are solidified. It might differ a little bit, but the guys that you named, I got, a completely different order. And as far as what I'm seeing this is probably one where, there might be a guy like Aziz Ojoulari who's really high on draft boards and might be sitting there, in the late 20s, and teams just feel like they have to jump on him, and vice versa with all the other guys. With Gregory Rousseau, it's I don't want to say it's a non-competitive group, because there are some absolute athletes here, but there's a lot of high risk, high reward type stuff, and kind of makes the draft day pretty interesting.
Definitely. And I had fun watching Ojoulari at Georgia. He was a lot of fun to watch, especially this past year. And led the SEC in tackles for loss, sacks, and forced fumbles too. And that's definitely saying something.
I saw Aziz, he's not afraid to step it against some of those big old linemen in the run game either. There was some great tape. I want to say it was from one of the PFF guys thrown out probably a few weeks ago now, but multiple times he's not afraid to throw his body in. There's obviously a lot of upside with him. And, absolutely agree with just about everything you said with your assessment on him.
And he has one thing, just from what I've read from scouting reports, is something I really like. I think Von Miller does it best. Well, he did it best in his prime, at least. They have something called bend. Basically, like, Von Miller could run full speed underneath, like, a kitchen table. Like, his bend and his, it's just ridiculous. So when I read a scouting report that says this player is good bend, that's very encouraging sign for a D end. And with that production at the SEC level, that's encouraging. But these guys, who knows where he could go. These D linemen, it's really up in the air, especially with all the activity with offense early in this draft. It'll be truly a wild card, I think. But let's move on now to another category here. We're going to move over to the linebackers now. So, Remy, why don't you take this one away, buddy?
Yes, sir. Well, I think talent-wise, the first linebacker, obviously Micah Parsons, but we have heard about his character and supposed off-the-field issues with alleged hazing. Some may call him a scumbag. So I mean, that's kind of what I was looking at. But a 6'3" guy, he's good. I probably would, if he was there. I don't know if I'd take him. I'd probably take him at like 17, maybe.
Wow.
But
I mean, his projections are all over the place.
Right. I've seen him with Minnesota. I've seen him as high as like 12. I've seen him with Minnesota at 14 again.
I've seen him at the Lions at 7. And right. I would not hate it.
I wouldn't hate it either.
God only knows they need somebody to, especially at the linebacker position, to have that type of.
And Minnesota's in the place to draft him. It's just, I don't know. We just signed Nick Vigil from the Bengals, which he's still pretty young. Maybe he's a replacement for Anthony Barr if we sign Parsons and let Barr go with his big contract. So maybe be on the lookout for that and shock all the Viking fans. I have a sentimental little piece with Barr. So he's Mike Zimmer's first ever draft pick. But second linebacker is Barney's guy, and I'm going to slaughter this name, Barney, out of Notre Dame. Jeremiah, is it Koramoah?
Owusu Koramoah. Owusu Koramoah.
I think I like this dude more than Parsons because I don't know. He seems like a 6'1" speedster, right? I don't know honestly too much about him. I didn't watch too many Notre Dame games, but Barney, help me out. What did you see?
He's just one of these new age hybrid linebackers here that are really fast, have really good ball skills, and like the game evolving to a more pass dominant league.
Right.
This is just one of those guys that can cover a lot of the faster backs out in the flats, and he's just really good sideline to sideline. Really good player. And
he's what I've read about him too is that he's an intelligent player, and he's very versatile. You can play him in different schemes. You can even put him at safety. Or out of the nickel package. So I think that versatility might get him above Micah Parsons. Because Micah Parsons, a lot of people have compared him to, I've seen a lot of comparisons, at least, like a lot of these draft people, they do like player comps, and they have Devin White up there, a guy that kind of just explodes through a hole with great athleticism, but not necessarily like great in like coverage necessarily or anything like that, but just a guy that just pick a hole and you run through as fast as you can.
And wasn't he Dick Butkus Award winner?
No, it was Zaven Collins.
What's that?
Zaven Collins.
That was Zaven Collins. Okay, yeah. I got ahead of myself because that was leading in to my third was Zaven Collins out of Tulsa. Dick Butkus Award winner. Eric Kendricks won the Dick Butkus Award, and we all know he is probably top 2, and I'm gonna say 1. Probably best middle linebacker. I don't know in the league. That's just my opinion. And then Nick Bolton out of Missouri. I don't know too much about him. I just kind of saw where he was falling. I feel like this class really too isn't linebacker deep at all. I could be wrong though. And then Baron Browning from Ohio State.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
It's Big Ten football. It's always going to be gritty.
He's another like one of those inconsistent guys, but he can dominate in some stretches.
With the right coaching, I mean, like it takes a special coach to mold those guys and get their technique down to just unleash and be beast. That's why I think Daniil Hunter is going, like, that's how he turned out, just from Zimmer working with him and Andre Patterson.
I just want to throw out one more linebacker name personally that I just love watching him in college. It was Chaz Surratt out of North Carolina. That guy's just a baller. He's not necessarily like, I mean, he's a pretty athletic guy, 4'5", 40, which is pretty good for a linebacker. But I mean, he has a lot of improvements to do. I think from like just run, especially in the run game. But the guy's a leader on the field. That's somebody I wouldn't mind seeing the Lions take a little later in this draft, but he might be gone by then. But a fun dude to just watch on the field at the very least.
Absolutely. Anytime a linebacker is converted quarterback, somebody's super athletic and has a mind for the game. Definitely, I think a little bit undersized at position, but just like what you said, an absolute playmaker.
Yeah, 6'2", 230. So that's definitely on the lighter side. But man, the linebacker class is fun. It's again, this is another name you didn't mention, but he's been shooting up draft boards like crazy. Remy is Jamin Davis, out of Kentucky,
Yep.
234, 6'3". He had a really good workout, 4'5", 40, 9'7" broad jump. I mean, so the guy has some really explosive traits to him, and he's moved up in. I've seen him in some mocks in like late first round even. So he's really shooting up draft boards.
Nice.
That's a guy. He's a guy I don't think has a lot of tape either. I'm pretty sure. I think he had some play in 2019, but 2020 I think was his first like real full season playing at the college level.
2019 107 tackles, 2020 95 tackles. So
okay,
he's
not accurate. Not accurate. Yep, not accurate.
But yeah, a two-year starter, I believe. So let's move on now to Barney. And Barney, you got the cornerbacks. God only knows the Bears need a cornerback, so maybe one of these names will pop up at pick number 20 for the Bears on April 29th.
It's definitely a possibility. When you look at this draft and you see how deep some of these positions are, cornerback needs to be talked a lot more. This group is such an interesting group, and there's a lot of value that you'll be able to get well into the second round. There's 3 or 4 legacy cornerbacks right here that are just absolute studs coming from great genes that have been Pro Bowlers. And I'll get to it starting with number 5 on my list. And let me just say this disclaimer here. I will be gladly wrong if let me say this. I don't want to say it like that. If the Bears end up taking one of these guys, I'll be glad. But my list here, I had a hard time placing these guys here because they are just a lot of studs. But number 5, I'm going to go with Ahsante Samuel Jr., the son of 4-time Pro Bowler, Ahsante Samuel.
Oh, yeah. He's
the smallest of the 5 here. He's 5'10", 180 pounds. He's just an absolute athlete. He's probably going to go, I think, somewhere starting, around 25 to 35. I think he's a really, really good player. He makes a lot of good breaks on the ball. He has really good anticipation skills. That really jumps out for me. Next up, number 4 is a Chicago product, Greg Newsome. I can't say enough good things about this guy. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. He's a Chicago guy, but his senior year, he transferred down to that IMG Academy in Florida, where he bursted on the stage. He came back to Northwestern, had some injury problems early on. He was a true freshman starter, but his sophomore year ended early after about 8 games, but he still led the team in pass breakups. He's a dog.
That's the biggest concern with him, Barney, is his injuries.
Exactly. There's very little separation between him and the wide receivers. He's not going to overpower you. He just sticks to you like glue. In 34 targets, he only lit up 12 receptions this year. Really good player. I think he's going to fall right towards the end of the first round. Myself here,
and he really showed up in the Big Ten championship against Ohio State. That's where I think his name really came into the national spotlight for sure.
Sure.
And he's missed 3 games the last 3 seasons. So 9 games in total over the last 3 years.
Yeah, so that's that's the biggest concern there. At number 3, I got J.C. Horn. Like I said, it's tough to put these guys in any particular order here. He's a stud. He's the son of Joe Horn, the wide receiver, who had a good career in New Orleans. But I'm
just picturing him getting a pick 6 and then picking out a cell phone underneath the thing, and
he's a good again. I mean, he came out, he stepped in right as a true freshman, started 10 of 11 games, and has been a household name and captain on that South Carolina defense. Really good player, 6'1", 205. We're starting to get into the bigger, heavier, more physical cornerbacks here, which number 2 might surprise you guys that I'm going here, but I'm going to go with Patrick Surtain as my number 2 cornerback. Again, the son of a former Pro Bowl cornerback, Patrick Surtain the first. He's been a huge name. Where did he went to American Heritage High School, which is always on like ESPN when you're sometimes when they're facing like teams like St. Thomas Aquinas. He's been a blue chip from day one. Played really well. One of those guys with Saban that Saban says has just got an absolute mind for the game. He's really good, physical, right up in your face, press corner. And anyone that picks him is going to be pretty happy. I think he'll probably. It would surprise me if he fell past 15. But my number 1 overall cornerback is Caleb Barley out of Virginia Tech, and I say this purely out of an athletic standpoint, and just I really liked his tape a lot. He did have a microdiscectomy, a minor back surgery that basically just alleviated a herniated disc. He opted out due to COVID. He had some family trouble. His mom passed away like in 2018. In 2019, his dad wasn't feeling too well, so he just felt like it wasn't going to be a smart move. Playing, he was already a top guy, but this is a guy that's a converted quarterback. He's only been playing the position for 2 years. He stepped in originally his freshman year and played wide receiver. But again, injury history is the real concern with this guy, and he could fall out of the first round. But it's from a purely, athletic and just instinctual mindset. I think the sky's the limit. He's 6'2", 200. He's got really long arms, almost 34-inch arms. And he's my number 1 cornerback.
Yeah, so I mean, Caleb Fairley, I mean, without the injury history, he might be the number 1 cornerback in this class. But you can't ignore a major back surgery. He tore his ACL as well. I mean, the guy hasn't even been able to work out for scouts this offseason because of that back injury. So, and a back injury is nothing to mess around with either. That's arguably the most concerning injury you can have coming in the draft. I don't know, but yeah, Kinger, go ahead.
Barney's already hit the nail on the head. I think these top 4 or 5 corners, really, the potential for them, each of these guys, to turn out to be the number 1 corner out of this draft, it's right there. He mentioned Farley, obviously the big thing with him obviously is the injuries, and everybody knows there is a lot of potential there. A guy that he didn't mention that I think, people are saying that a lot of teams don't really have anything higher than a late second, third round draft grade on him, but he's an absolute physical specimen. And they're saying the potential is there if he can just really work on his techniques. And that's Ifeatu Molinawu out of Syracuse. Big safety, athletic with huge upside. The biggest thing with him is obviously his lateral quickness and ability to stay on the receiver's hips. But he's shown flashes of really having the skills necessary to be a quality corner in the NFL. We'll wait and see where he ends up going. But just based on what I've seen from him, he's a guy that mid-round flyer, it might be worth it for a team who's got some good corners in place, just looking for some additional depth.
Definitely. There's a lot of second-round grades on cornerbacks in this draft, so we might see a big run of cornerbacks on day 2 of the draft.
Is that guy, again, I don't know how to say his name, Melifonwu? Is his brother that the safety that came out, or might have been a cornerback, but 2 or 3 years ago in the draft, he was
Obi.
like 6'3". Yeah.
Obi. He played at Connecticut, I want to say.
Yeah, he played at Connecticut.
Yep.
He was like a monster. He was absolute, underwear Olympics combine like stud. He was like 6'3" or 6'4", could jump out of the stands. But yeah, that was somebody that was tough to keep off. But I just liked all the legacy players, and the cornerback's going to be a great position for people to draft at.
Yep, agreed.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. Yep, Connecticut. You got it right. And he also had another brother that played football at Rhode Island. So a lot of bloodlines there. So let's move on now to the last category that we have here, and that's safety. So Kinger, we're gonna bring it around full circle. We're gonna bring it back to you to kind of go over the safety class here. Not a super strong safety class, I believe, either.
No, not a super strong safety class, but guys that flashed a lot of potential in college. A couple guys had really good singular seasons. But just to start, the number one, I think it's pretty much consensus, is going to be Trevin Moehrig out of TCU. 6'2", 200 pounds. Over the last 2 years, 6 interceptions, over 20 passes deflected. Very instinctive safety, good ball skills, saying he's very complete, really has the ability to take good angles, can stick his nose in there in the run game. If he stays disciplined in the NFL, they're saying he's obviously got a potential to be a very good quality starting safety throughout his career. And then from there, it really comes down to, again, who teams like, right? And a couple names that we'll just start throwing out there, the guys that had good seasons in 2019, Javon Holland out of Oregon. He opted out in 2020. But again, he's a good quality athletic safety, very well-rounded. They're saying his coverage skills are the best, if not one of the best from the safety position in this draft. Really good at tracking the ball, saying he has the ability to step in and cover the slot if need be. But he's a little bit undersized, only 6'1". I think he was floating around 190, I think is what they were saying. So has shown on tape he can get bullied out of the box and get taken out of plays easily, but probably a guy that could have been benefited from a little bit more tape in 2020, but showed some good things in 2019 and decided he was going to focus this last year on training for the draft. Another guy that had absolutely beast years in 2018, 2019, looking like he was going to probably be a first rounder heading into this year, then dealt with some injuries, ended up opting out. But Cisco out of Syracuse, this is a guy who had 12 interceptions combined in 2018, 2019, 15 passes defended. Very explosive guy. Overall, just quality at reading plays, getting his nose in there in the air when in the run game. Good coverage. The one thing that they knock him is just a tackling ability. But his ball skills were, again, second to none in this class. They were saying that, again, after his seasons, everybody was very high on him heading into 2020. Still think he's got a lot of potential in the NFL, and we're just going to kind of wait and see where he ends up going. And then from there, we're really going to talk about guys who you're really going to have to probably take flyers on. There's potential there for him. A guy that I did mention was Elijah Molden out of Washington. This is a guy who has shown, again, that he has some potential in regards to coverage and ball skills. Quite very quick for the position, and at very good at baiting the QB. They say he's got great eyes, ability to read the field, and good closing speed, coverage speed. So we'll see where he ends up going out of Washington. And then the other guy that I like, he's very undersized. I don't even know if you guys would consider him a safety here, because there's a chance he's going to end up moving to the nickel slot position. But that's Ardarius Washington, Morig's running mate in the secondary out of TCU. Undersized, but this guy's got great speed, right? Obviously very quick, fluid hips. Struggled against big receivers, but 5 interceptions in 2019. That's where they're kind of potentially saying he could end up moving to that nickelback position. But those two really dominated and played very well together. Probably mid-round, third, fourth round draft grade on him. But if he ends up switching positions based on what they're saying, his skill set could translate very well to the NFL. I think that might have been 5. But the other guy I wanted to mention, who's probably going to be a similar guy to the Molinawu out of Syracuse.
A lot of big names on this podcast.
Nobody has butchered names worse than me tonight, boys. Let me tell you that. But Hamza Nasruddin out of Florida State. Again, a guy who he's a big safety. He's 6'4", 220. Very tough safety. Could end up switching to kind of that hybrid linebacker safety role that a lot of teams are starting to utilize in the NFL. The Packers themselves are a team that has experimented with that quite a bit. But this guy is as pure of a tackler from that position that you're going to see. He's a great one defender, can obviously hang with blocks with bigger guys in blocks because of his size. We'll wait and see if he ends up staying at that safety position, because quickness is not a strength of his by any means. Really doesn't seem to show much burst and coverage and ball skills. So we'll wait and see, but he could be a guy thrown in there on specific rundown situations, maybe covering a tight end like we talked about, that probably will get drafted a little bit higher than maybe he should because of that size and that potential, because he was a very sure tackler in that run game.
Can I throw out a name for you too, Kinger?
Yep.
Just the safety that ran the Estes 40, that's listed as a safety at least, is Tyler Coyle out of Purdue. He's like a 7th rounder or under. He ran a 4.36 40. What do you know anything about him?
No, I don't.
Okay. No worries.
Rob Kinger.
Man,
I know. Yeah, I'm a terrible fan. I will. I'll take that on the shoulder. I don't even know who that is.
He's a senior, but maybe he was injured this year. I don't even know much about him. I was just looking at the safety class and looking at the speed, and he showed up on top of the list. So I thought that might be notable for you.
We're gonna have to cut this part, boys. Just cut this part.
Yeah, but the safety class definitely not top heavy by any means. But also, you have the, safety in the NFL is very different. A lot of people coming out of college that played safety, quote unquote, don't end up playing safety. It's a position that needs so much more versatility than ever before in the NFL. A lot of linebackers are transitioning into safety nowadays and such. So, it's really, and cornerbacks. So it's really a mixed bag, kind of who ends up actually playing there. I mean, look at how Jamal Adams is used. He's constantly rushing the passer, playing like from the linebacker position. So I mean, he's used all over the field. They pretty much just want the purest athlete out there at safety these days in the NFL. And it's also, at least what I've been, on other podcasts with like former NFL scouts and such that have been watching tape, safety in college is like the hardest one to project for the NFL, because a lot of these safeties in college are playing a vastly different defense than they will in the NFL. The NFL likes to play a lot of single high, like an Earl Thomas type that's going to range across the entire field. And in college, they're playing a lot of 2 deep, 3 deep safeties that only cover a certain portion of the field. So there's that part to consider too.
I got to make this one comment in my defense, because I know I'm going to catch shit from my buddies tomorrow who listen to this. They're going to get on it. Okay, Tyler Coyle was a UConn transfer, so he only played 1 season at Purdue and really did play sparingly last year. Okay. So I feel a little bit better knowing that, but still, it's not acceptable. I got to know my guys. Come on.
Fair enough. All right, gentlemen, that was a lot of names we went through. A lot of prospects that are going to be on the board for each of our teams. Listeners, go on Instagram and let us know who you think that you might be targeting for your team. What is the Vikings, Bears, Lions, or Packers? I mean, a lot of names here on the defense side of the ball. At least speaking for the Lions, I know they need all the defensive help. All the defensive help they can get. So I'm sure a lot of these names hopefully will be falling more likely day 2, day 3. But nonetheless, I mean, do you guys have anything to add about any of these prospects? All right. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Next week, we'll be talking the offensive side of the ball where there's a little more top-heavy firepower there. And I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about that, especially at the quarterback position for the Lions. Vikings? Are the Packers going to take another quarterback in the first round? Find out next week.
No, we will not.
Nonetheless, thank you, everybody, for listening. Instagram at The Pylon. Twitter at The Pylon Pod. Please subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Stay tuned next week and the upcoming weeks as we head into the NFL Draft. For Remy, Kinger, Barney, I'm Big Z. Thank you for listening. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Bear down.